So my name is Katherine Miller, and I live here right in the town of Lee. And quite a while ago, like maybe, I don't know, at least a dozen years ago or more, there was an article that came out in one of the major papers about the insect apocalypse. And I had never heard about this, and I started reading it. And by the end of the article, I was so devastated and so worried about the fate of not only the insects but the human race that I just thought, oh my God, what can I do about this? It was one of those things that came along. I mean, I've had a lot of experiences like that over my life where I've been deeply moved by something and motivated to do something about it, but never about insects. I had never really anticipated that this would bring about such deep feeling in me. So what I started to do is I started to just ask around and do some research, and there's so much out there in response to this, and has been even before this article came out, that I was and a lot of books, as you can see, have come out over the years. Doug Tallamy is one of the big voices. Bringing Nature Home is one of his most famous books, and so I started to read all of this. And I live on a little 0.2 of an acre plot, and we started to plant a lot of natives. We've gotten rid of all our lawn now. I'm not necessarily saying that's what you have to do, but just to give you an idea of how crazy I am about this situation. And then I said to my husband, I see this as ground zero. And now from here, I want to just start expanding outward. So I helped with a bunch of other people. We started Lee Community Gardens, and we started growing food not only for people, but also for pollinators. And so I've been doing that since 2021, and it was a great COVID project, and it's still ongoing. And anything that you want to ask me about that at the end, you can definitely let me know, because we're always looking for people that want to be involved. But one of the things that I do through Lee Community Gardens is teach as many people as I can. And so this class was a welcome opportunity for me to share what I've learned and pass on the resources that I've used in order to, help make an impact on this. So let's just make introductions. I've introduced myself, and would you like to start, Emily?
Sure. My name is Emily. I grew up in Lee. I live in Pittsfield, and I just got my yard certified by the National Wildlife as a
excellent
pollinator and wildlife.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's great.
Just learn more on how to expand. And do you have the property up here at the top of
High Street?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was my inspiration. I thought it was so cool.
Oh, that's great.
Dad and I have been working on that and expanding, and yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, congratulations. Emma? Is it Emma?
Yeah. My name's Emma. I'm here with my mom. We live in Pittsfield, and I guess we're kind of just getting started with this, but we want to get some plants growing in our yard and stuff. So.
Fantastic. Great.
Denise.
Janine, right.
Denise.
Denine, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay. And same as you, we're just getting started and trying to
Yeah.
figure out how to do the right.
Perfect. That's great. Valerie.
Valerie Blum. I'm on the Lee Greener Gateway Committee, which is we were able to recruit
Katherine.
Yeah.
and she's on it also, and Ann was on it. So I've just sort of been aware of what Catherine's been doing. And you didn't mention your verges, but so people
Yes,
all
exactly,
along,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, the pollinator pathway.
Yes, on High Street. She's asking neighbors.
We're now a
to
pollinator city. So
Yeah.
that's a big deal.
And so I'm just, I'm learning, these things are not necessarily good for your garden, and then these other, and then when I do what I plant things to be aware of what
Yeah.
is good and native plants and not invasive.
Right.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Trish Johnson, I'm also on the Greater Gateway, and I help out at the community garden, and I live in the townhouses down here in Garfield, and we're trying to plan a pollinator pathway that we're going to do eventually, so that's part of the reason I'm here for information, what type of plants to put down.
It takes time.
I know.
The planning and figuring it out. It does. Sometimes it takes time.
We got from you, and the thing is huge now.
Yeah.
At first, the
Great.
thing was going to die, and then I put a stake to hold it up, And I went, oh my God, look at it. It's spread. It's beautiful. It's up against the fence. So.
Perfect.
And you gave it to us because we were looking for some pollinators. So hopefully, we'll get started on that soon.
Wonderful. And Anne, thanks for being here. Is there any particular facts or things you want to learn about today? Or okay, great. So let me just look at my notes to make sure. So one of the things that I like to try and do is get people to understand, like, from a particular perspective. Because when I look out at the Berkshires, I see green. I see green everywhere. And so it's pretty hard to convince people that there's a problem when they're like, but look, it's all green. Look at all the trees, look at all the flowers, and Lee is beautiful, the Berkshires are beautiful, the forests are beautiful. Everything looks really beautiful, especially when there's been rain like this. And what's happened to me is when I started to understand the nature of this problem for pollinators, and I started to see things differently, and I started to look at the lawns and not see them as a beautiful, lush, verdant green, but more like a desert. And because lawns don't really support our native pollinators. They have their place, they look beautiful in a landscape, but they don't really support other animals. And insects, which are animals like us, they need the same things we need. They need food, they need something to drink, and they need a place to stay. Like to live, to raise their young, to have their young, to raise their young, and go through all the different cycles of their life. So I like this metaphor because I like to go to Moe's every Thursday night with my friends. And I was thinking, what if this town only had Moe's? What if it was only a pub, the whole town? There was no place to live. The only thing you could come for here was a drink. Nobody would come here. I mean, unless you had the means to get here, unless you could come from a long distance away where you could live, where there was food and there was habitat, and there were schools, there were hospitals, there were all those things, you would only come to Moe's to get a drink of a very particular type. And that's kind of how lawns are and ornamentals are. Some ornamental plants will offer nectar to our native bees and butterflies. Some of them will, but that's all. They don't offer a nesting site. They don't offer food, which is like pollen. Nectar is great for energy, but they need pollen. Pollen is baby food. That's what they feed their larvae. So if you don't have these other things, these other elements in a landscape, then the bees won't be able to live there, the butterflies, the moths, and all the other beneficial insects that we have. So also the other interesting thing about our native bees, and it was funny because when Joe came in, he said, "Are you the beekeeper?" Thinking this was about honeybees. And I thought, this is an incredible teaching moment because honeybees are more like livestock. They're agricultural animals. We raise them for their honey, for their wax, for some of their services, like pollinating services. But our actual native bees do fantastic. They don't produce honey, they don't produce wax, but they pollinate better than honeybees. So there's a big difference to feeding those types of bees than feeding honeybees. So any questions about any of this that I've said so far? So when I look at the landscape, I'm thinking about these little animals. Some of them, unlike bees, which can fly maybe 2 miles, a lot of these bees will only live within a circumference of maybe 500 feet, like very small areas. So within that area, they have to find everything that they need because they can't get it anywhere else. And if they're in an area that has flowers from spring to midsummer, fantastic, but then what if there's no food to take them into the fall? So you want to try and have a landscape that provides the food, water. Water is very nice, even just like a little bird bath or something like that, and the habitat. So there's some problems with, just our common practices. Like, I love having a sidewalk in front of my house. I love having a road that I can travel on. We're so used to these things. But if you start to look at the landscape a little bit differently and you think of how much lawn, how much asphalt, how many things are paved over or covered over, and you start to realize, wow, this all used to be just not bare ground, but just ground, just soil, and now it's covered. 70% or more of our native bees in this area are ground nesting bees. So if you don't have the proper kind of soil, when I say proper, like soil that they can actually dig into and nest, then they can't raise their young. They can't lay their eggs. They can't do any of that stuff. So the other thing is landscaping cloth. So landscaping cloth, I use it. I create gardens. I use it for paths and things like that. It's just used so much, especially in ornamental gardens, because everything's expected to be like a little island. A little island here with mulch, a little island there with mulch. But as a result, a lot of those animals that will live in the ground, bumblebees and other ground nesting bees, won't be able to use that ground to nest in. There's invasives. So a lot of the ornamentals that we love are also invasive, like Norway maples, beautiful trees, but they regrow all over the place and they don't provide any of the habitat, any of the food or nectar that our insects can use. Think about it. I'm trying to think of a really weird cuisine, like if you, like in some Japanese cuisine, they eat like raw jellyfish and different things like that. And if someone set that in front of you, and it's perfectly good food, it has nutrition in it. You will not only survive but probably thrive if you eat it. It has everything you need. But you're like, I can't eat that. That's not food. Not only does it not look like food to me, but it's still alive. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing with the bee. A bee may look at a flower like on a butterfly bush or something like that. It can drink that, a butterfly can drink that nectar, but it's not the nectar that it needs. It's not the nectar that it wants. It doesn't have the same qualities to it. It doesn't have the same nutrition to it. And for most of the bees, though, they don't even recognize it as food. Most of the pollinators are like, I don't eat that. Oh, let me go over here to this milkweed. That's what I need, is over there. So that's some ways of thinking about how we're providing food for the bees and pesticides and herbicides. So one of the interesting situations, we have a lot of mosquitoes. It's just the way it is here in the Berkshires. And when we spray for mosquitoes, a lot of those companies will say targeted, it's natural, it's pyrethrin, it's not going to hurt anybody. But the truth of the matter is that's going to kill all the insects on your property. Insects you might want to kill and insects you definitely do not want to kill. All of them. There's nothing you can do about that. There's no way to target mosquitoes with those types of pesticides. So we have to start thinking more about what it is that we're trying to do. And if we care about these things, then we need to start acting on them. Herbicides as well, now that we know that all these bees nest in the ground, if we're putting herbicides on that soil, how are they going to nest there without being affected by those toxins? So those are just some common things, like right across the road from where I live, they have these little signs up that say, do not walk on the lawn. Chemicals have been applied. And the town itself has agreed to not use pesticides and those types of things. But your neighbor or other people can do whatever they want. So these are the things we need to start understanding.
So lawn care people are not doing well with that, right? They're not aware of that?
No. We need to...
Well, they're aware of it.
Some, I think, are aware of it, and some are, it depends on how open you are to information that doesn't align with what you're doing. But there are some more and more. I have a nephew that started a lawn care business, and it's out west. It's in Colorado, but he is creating a business around sustainable lawn practice. So still lawns, but how to do it without polluting the environment. So more and more of that is coming about. Not nearly enough for the kind of change we need to make, but it's happening.
So can I ask a question about the town? Was the town spraying in certain areas and then stopped? Or what, I'm just trying to think.
I actually don't know. I just heard about this recently, and I haven't had time to talk with the DPW and stuff to find out what that actually means. But somebody just said to me, hey, this is either it's on the docket or it's already been agreed to. I don't think, when I've talked to the DPW, that they have not been into it. But I don't know if there's a rule around it.
But I thought we passed an article.
Oh, so we did.
Right.
No, I thought you were asking me. I didn't know. I wasn't sure about exactly what had happened. I just heard it had happened.
Oh, well, we passed an article, but I don't really know exactly what the wording was. I didn't forbid, people who live here.
No, they can't really do that, but they can do it on the public areas.
Right, and I just didn't know if there was much being done anyway, or was it just
I don't think there was, yeah, exactly.
Especially if it become a big city, which is something.
Exactly, right. So, I'm kind of a get-it-done kind of gal, and I like to I like to make things happen. I don't like to get too bogged down in the details, but I do like to understand things. So there's some really simple approaches you can take. One of the first, before we get into how to create a pollinator-friendly habitat, I think we'll skip to the next part, which is just getting started, because I think that'll also address you guys, Emma and Deneen. It's because not everybody has a piece of ground, okay? So the first question you need to ask is, do you have a lawn? Is it a lawn that you can kill? Do you have the right to kill your lawn? If you're a renter, that could be a problem. And do you have if so, do you have a patch of lawn that has a sunny spot? And you want, there are a lot of natives that will grow in shade, tons and tons and tons. Happy to go into them. There's also, most of the flowers that we really love and fall in love with need about 6 hours of sun. So you need to find a place where there's about 6 hours of sun. Also, a lot of the natives that we really love are also big. Like Joe Pyeweed can get like this tall and this big around. And a lot of other plants are also very tall. So when you're planning your space, you just got to remember that. And it's good to do a little research on plants as well. And I have a handout that I gave you that you can look at. No pots, no problem. Sunny spot on your steps, some containers of plants that you'll be amazed at how many pollinators you will get. It's not quite the same as creating a habitat, but it will help those pollinators that may be around and just need a little extra. I was learning somewhere that some bees need to take 2 or 3 trips to a flower in order to get enough pollen to put in the nest for their bee babies. Some need to take 40 trips to get enough pollen just for that one little bee baby. So one nest for like a ground or cavity nesting bee might have 1 to 8 different cells in it. And so every cavity, they have to keep filling those up. So you can see it would be quite a lot of trips to flowers. So if you can provide some extra flowers in any way, it'll be helpful. And then if you have no space or you have no time or you have when I say no time, I'm sorry. If you have no space, you want to get your hands in the dirt, there are always neighbors. If you have neighbors that are working on something, if you have friends that have a garden, if you have family that you can help with. Also, check out, there's local land trusts, and almost, a lot of towns have land trusts where you can get busy getting rid of invasives or things like that. And then there's pollinator groups like Lee Community Garden. in our town, we have Lee Greener Gateway Committee, which does a lot of work working with invasives in the public lands around Lee, public gardens. So there's a lot of ways that you can get involved, even if you don't have the space or the means or whatever to start your own garden. So I would really recommend that you don't let yourself be discouraged by any such limitations. If you have any questions at all how you can contribute, call me. I'll give you my number. I will think.
Saturday, the end of the month.
Yeah, exactly. So the most powerful step, of course, is using keystone species. Has everyone heard of keystone species at all? So keystone species are the plants that support the largest numbers of pollinators through all stages of their life, or through most stages of their life, usually through all. So an oak tree is such a good example of that. Not everybody can plant an oak tree. You don't all have room for it, and you may not want that much shade if you're planting a pollinator garden. An oak tree, though, will support almost 500 different types of insects. They provide the food, the nectar, they provide the nesting sites, they provide the leaves for eggs to be hatched on. They provide, with the leaves on the ground, they provide sites for that to overwinter and for nesting. So there's a lot of plants like this. I think oaks are the only one that support that many insects. But there's quite a few plants that are native to the New England area that support hundreds of different varieties of insects. So the more of those types of plants that you can place in your landscape, the more beneficial it would be for your local ecosystem and the diversity of insects that you can support. Let's see. There's a lot of resources at the end of this sheet. And these are resources that I use like all the time. I'm looking up these resources and going to these links. We're going to provide the link to this at the video. So anybody watching this, you can look for that. And most of these are just right here in Massachusetts or New England. They are very close by. Nationwide, there are even more. So it's really easy to find the information you need. If you want to know more about keystone species, you can look at some of Doug Tallamy's books. Also, if you look online, there's a lot of information. All you have to do is put keystone pollinator plants for New England, or even Massachusetts, or even Western Massachusetts. It'll really narrow it down. So, any questions about any of that information? It's all good? Okay. So, starting your own... So who here first? So you have lawn that you've already converted into a garden, mm-hmm. right? And do you want to convert more? Or yes. Okay, great. And you have lawn that you want to also continue? Okay. And you have some sunny spots? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And you already have a garden, I know.
Right, and it was grass, a lot of it's grass when we moved in. And we
great.
created this rock garden. If there was some rock garden, then we expanded it.
Yeah, great. And Trish, I know what you've got areas that you're going to plant, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the questions that comes up a lot, I take a lot of different webinars and stuff, and also another talk that I've given one of the questions that comes up a lot is, how do I get rid of my lawn? So when you decided to make that first garden, what did you do?
The first garden, I think my dad just turned over the sod.
Okay.
And we built a raised bed on top of that.
Oh, nice. Okay. Did you add more soil on top of this?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we did hardware cloth, cardboard, and filled in with soil.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, since
Nice.
then we've just done sort of cardboard and threw on some soil.
Right,
Yeah.
right, cool.
Getting a little easier with every garden bed we do. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And the hardware cloth was to keep animals from
rodents coming up. Yeah.
Right, okay, got it. That's really great.
So that just kills the photosynthesis and then they die? The cardboard?
The cardboard, yeah. And especially if you add a few inches of soil on top of the cardboard. So what Emily was saying is hardware cloths, especially if you're doing a raised bed, so then you can connect it to the bottom of that bed, it just keeps voles and other rodents from coming up and eating the roots of the plants that you've just planted, because they do like some of them. And then when you put the cardboard down, it just helps keep any light, or it just creates a barrier that will deteriorate it over time and add to the organic matter in the soil.
So you're actually planting the same time as you're killing?
Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
Okay. You're not killing and then planting.
Right, exactly. And you can do that, but this, I think, what Emily was describing is definitely a way that I can recommend. You know, it's something that I've done. And then, of course, at the same time, a lot of the native plants are very hardy, and so the ones that you did without hardware cloths, are they doing okay?
Yeah, so I have 2 other beds that we've just put cardboard and soil on and mulched on some of it, got some pine chips dropped off. And,
Yeah.
And they're doing great. And now that original one is kind of, old and the soil's not so great, so I'm sort of trying some hugelkultur methods.
Oh, nice.
Of, like laying in
Yes.
some dead debris and just piling a little bit of fresh soil on top of that, so it kind of replenishes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just some more that we just ripped up the sod and threw some more herbs and stuff in.
Right. So hugelkultur, which Emily just brought up, that's a little bit more of an advanced technique. It takes a lot more digging, but I think the interesting thing that we can add in here is that native plants don't need a lot of nitrogen. They don't need a lot of compost and things like that. They do like organic matter, but they're pretty adaptable. They will thrive in almost any soil, especially some of the more, social ones that really like to get around. There's not much you have to, unless your soil is just 100% clay or a lot of clay, you shouldn't really have to worry too much for most of the plants that you'll start out with. Once you start getting into maybe some, widening the diversity, then you might have to think a little bit more about right plant, right place, which means you're choosing a plant that maybe only gets 3 hours of sunshine and likes to have wet feet, for example. Then you can start to look for a very specific plant that fills that little niche in your landscape. But in the beginning, when you're just getting started, what I recommend is you just pick a sunny spot. You either dig up the sod, which is the hard way to do it, or you just lay down some cardboard and you pile some soil on top of that and then some dead leaves on top of that. And then you plant right into that.
So the cardboard is not a special cardboard?
No. It shouldn't have shiny paper on it. You want to remove the tape. If
that'll decompose, you say?
It'll decompose. The worms love it. So the worms will come up there and it'll kill the grass underneath, and then the worms will come up. One thing that can happen when you rototill, but you guys put lots of stuff on top of that, but when you break up the sod, a lot of times what can happen is you are exposing the seed bank underneath. And the seed bank will be all the grasses and weeds and dandelions and things like that. So if you just turn the soil and then you plant right into it, oftentimes you'll get like this incredible batch of weeds, like a lot of crabgrass and I know from experience, having done that it takes a long time then to control those weeds. One of the things you mentioned also was mulch. So mulch is good in, so the kind of mulch that you see when you go to a big box store and they have the strips in between the parking and it's just like this thick, and that is not good mulch for native plantings. That really doesn't work. But in the beginning, if you just put a few like the pine chips or, just locally, some big tree service comes by and dumps off some chips in your yard, those are great if just maybe an inch or so, because what they do is they keep any weed seeds that are on the top from that seed bank, they keep those from getting sunlight. And so they'll suppress the weeds a lot. So these are some ways you can think about planting, getting more natives into your garden.
They also brought a bunch of new weeds.
They brought a bunch of new weeds?
I was not expecting
that. In the chips?
Yeah, I have bull thistle growing everywhere.
Oh my gosh, what is it?
Bull thistle. So
bull thistle. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So you gotta kind of like dig and pick.
Oh my God, those things are terrifying. They're very prickly.
So,
yeah.
Free chips, but also.
Yeah. So I think if you look at the very back of your the handouts that I gave you, what I have here is a recipe card. It's a garden card, but the idea is it's like a recipe card. What I like about what Emily has been describing is they chose a spot. Do you know what size it was?
4 by 12.
4 by 12. So, and it could be, this one is for 3 by 6. That's probably one of the smallest areas that you could pick. And the nice thing about it is you've got a spot. And so it's got a border. You don't have to worry about anything outside the border. You don't have to worry about expanding right away. You can just start with that spot. And so this recipe card will tell you these are the plants, and there's 9 different plants here. You need to get like maybe 2 or 3 of each of them. So this is, you can get them as plugs. You don't need to get them as full-grown, big, gallon pots or anything like that. But what it does is it gives you blossoms of different colors, blossoms that bloom at different times of the year. So some in the spring, some in summer, some in fall. It gives you plants of different heights, and it gives you plants that some of these are keystone species. So plants that serve the largest amounts of insects, the greatest diversity of insects. So this is, for me, I saw this and I fell in love with it immediately because I was like, oh my God, there's so many people out there I know that would love to do this, but they may not be geeky nerdy like me and want to look up everything and do, be doing constant research on, all the different plants. They may just want to get started, and they may be feeling like, oh my God, it's mid-June. How do I do this? And there's still plenty of time to do this and get it in. And next year, you'll really be amazed at how much the plants grow from this year to next. So if you go to this website, the Pollinator Partnership, they have recipe cards like this for Alaska, for the Northwest, for the Southwest, for the eastern seaboard below Atlanta. They have these recipe cards for all the different areas and regions of the United States. So if you have friends and you have family or whatever that live in different areas and they're also interested in this, you can turn them on to this. It's very helpful. On the back of it, it will start to all the things that we've just talked about. Finding a sunny spot in your lawn. How to, remove. It doesn't go into the how-to of some of the things like removing the existing lawn. But it does talk about buying plants at a local plant nursery, which I highly recommend. Local native plant nursery if you can find it. And asking really picky questions like, are you sure that these plants were not grown with neonicotinoids? So the neonics are the ones that are in the plants. They're systemic. If you buy a plant like that and then your pollinators will go there, they will die. So I have avoided buying from big box stores or unless they have a label on them that says organic or something, because they're these things are really persistent. They say, no, they don't last very long. But no, they persist. They get in the soil. They cause all kinds of havoc. So we need to be really careful about where we source our native plants. And again, happy to talk to any of you, if not today, but later on, if you guys are in the middle of doing something and you're like, who can I call? Call me. I love to talk about this stuff. So, so it basically gives you your basic, how to plant. And then important is making sure your plants get really well established. So a lot of the natives are very drought resistant. They're also, as long as the soil is well drained, they don't mind water. Like everyone keeps saying, oh, are your gardens flooded? And I'm like, nope. Luckily, all the soil is real well drained. So it's a lot of rain, but they're doing great. So, but you do need to water really well when they're first going in. And then you want to make sure they don't dry out. And if you have a raised bed or something like that, they will dry out faster than if they're planted straight in the ground. So that's something you want to just make sure, even if you just go away for a week and there's not going to be any rain for that week, you want somebody that can come and water your plants for you. Just to make sure, especially that first year, and if it's a really dry spring the next year, that spring. Once you get through that, by the next summer, they should be pretty good to go. And then it'll change. It'll change over years. Some of your plants will walk, and you'll have a clump of something here, and then it won't be there, and then it will be over there. And you're like, what happened? So all of this, we're talking a lot about plants and native plants right now. The reason why is because the class is about how to feed the bees, and the only way to really successfully feed the bees and the butterflies is through these native plants and having them from as early in spring as you can to as late in the fall as you can, so they have a banquet this whole time. Any questions about any of that?
What do these bees look like?
What do bees look like?
No, I mean, there's honeybees, there's bumblebees,
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I mean, there are flies. I mean, they look like flies. To me, I would say that's a fly, and they're actually a bee. So there's so many different bees. This is one of the great, I'm doing a pollinator stewardship certification course right now. This is one of the books they recommend, along with Common Bees. The cool thing is my husband really loves to take pictures of these bees, and then we look them up on an app, but we also look them up in here. So, for instance, I'll show you one. Oh, you'll see these tiny, really green, like green sweat bees, and they're Apidae family. There's so many different families. There's thousands of different bees. There are short-tongued bees. There are long-tongued bees. They need different flowers in order to successfully get the nectar and pollen that they need. There are bees that are only out for maybe a month. They come out in spring. There's certain spring flowers that they feed on. They get everything they need from those flowers. They build their nest. They lay their eggs. They die. And then the next spring, those eggs hatch. And that next round is just open for that 1 month. So, and then there's like bumblebees that are here in the spring. I was just reading something very interesting about those bees. They have this really strong way of vibrating their wings, and it warms them up. So they can actually come out really early. Like I've seen them in the daffodils when it's still really cold out, because they can use that friction of their wings to warm themselves up. And in doing that, they can survive those colder temperatures. So those spring flowers are really important to them. But they're also a bee that is usually around also till late in the fall. So
Do bees die within 1 year, or do they?
Yeah, most of them are only alive for one season.
Because they can't handle the cold. I didn't know they were way in the ground.
Well, some do. Some do. A lot of what they do is they're around for either the whole season or part of the season. They dig their tunnels or nest in cavities or bore a hole in wood and nest in there. They lay their eggs, but then they're usually not around. They're not like honeybees. They're not around to take care of their young. Their young hatch the next year, and they start the whole cycle over again. So, and you know the story with monarchs. I don't know if you're familiar, but they go all the way down to Mexico and back again. But it's not the same monarch that goes all the way to Mexico and back. It's different generations. And so somehow they pass down that generational knowledge. So they need milkweed all along the way of their path in order to get the food they need, and mostly because butterflies can get nectar from a lot of different plants, but they need milkweed. Milkweed is the only plant they can lay their eggs on. And that's the only thing those little larvae caterpillars can eat. They have to eat that. Once they come out as a butterfly, then again, they can get some sustenance and energy from other things. I like to use the butterfly bush as a good example because I have a good friend that I've never argued with her in my life, and we had an argument about the butterfly bush. Because she said, I see butterflies on this bush all the time. So why shouldn't we love it? I love it. It's beautiful. Why shouldn't I plant it? And I was saying to her, look, okay, I get it. There are butterflies on it. They are drinking the nectar. But they aren't supplying habitat. They aren't supplying the pollen or whatever else that is needed, right? So they tend to spread. So they take up habitat that a native could be taking up, a native plant. And a similar shrub that has beautiful flowers could be grown there that would do a much better job of supporting those local invertebrates than this plant. And so I don't know if she ever got one in the end or not. But it made me really think about it in terms of quality too. Like the metaphor I was using before, we could survive on beer. We could go to the local pub and a lot of people did back in colonial days. They lived on hard apple cider and, beer and different things because the water wasn't safe. You could do that. Your quality of life would not be that great, and you might not get a whole lot done, right? So there's still not enough studies done on the quality of the nectar that's provided by these non-native bushes. So look, if that's all there is, great. At least they have something. We want them to survive. But what we really want is we want them to be able to thrive, and we want them to be able to increase in population. It's very difficult for us as humans. Our lifespans are relatively short. So it's hard for us to see the change that has happened over the last 100 or 200 years in terms of insects. But I can remember in my lifetime, as a kid, I grew up near a wetland, and if I rode my bike without tying a scarf over my face, like literally one of my mom's, kind of transparent nylon scarves, I was swallowing bugs by the mouthful. Because all you had to do is open your mouth once and you had at least a couple.
Within the last 20 years, biking on.
Yes. But do you remember, though, that when we used to drive as kids, we used to stop all the time to clear the windshield off? We had bug guts on our windshield. That never happens. I never have to. There may be once a year at most where something big splats, but I never have to clean my windshield because of insects. It's only because of dirt. So why? Why is that? And that's why this article was written about the insect apocalypse. It was like, look, this is happening all over the world. And they're doing these tests now called, they're like license plate tests. So, because it's a very particular size, and it's on the front of the car. So what they do is they count the number of insects on those license plates. They do it in Europe and they do it here. I don't know how many places around the world they do it, but what they've noticed is that there's been an incredible, like over 50% decrease, if not more, in the number of insects that are hitting those license plates. So, it's the good news is that we actually all have it in our power to do something about it. This book that I was saying that I really love, it's called A New Garden Ethic by Benjamin Vaught. And the reason I love it is because he's very brave. And he's saying, look, if we're educated, if we know about this, if we have the means, if we have the piece of lawn that we can dedicate to this, we have a moral imperative to respond to this. It's not that hard, actually. We can do something. And if, gardening is a way to address this issue. So, a new garden ethic. Let's take the power that we have and use it to help these animals. Is there any questions about what this? I know this is this is a crisis situation, and I'm extremely positive about what we can do. So I want to present both sides of this story.
How do we best overwinter the gardens?
The best overwintering is to not do anything. If there's areas that have a particular problem, like if there's a rain spout, a downspout coming down and creating, icy spot or something where things are not going to do well, then I would recommend creating like a rain garden or something like that, so that will be, don't try to grow things there, that aren't going to overwinter well in that kind of situation. So instead of, trying to manipulate too much the facts on the ground as you find them, I would try to use the resources you have. Like a lot of people have really wet areas, and there's like, how can I get rid of that wet area? And my question is always like, well, first of all, does it need to be gotten rid of? Is there a reason for that? Because sometimes there is. Like maybe it's too close to the foundation of the house, and you don't want that. So, okay, fine. But if it isn't, then I would put different plants there that do well having soggier feet. So red cardinal flower, that's one of the ones, it's cardinal lobelia. Beautiful, like the most stunning color of red you've ever seen, and it loves wet. So there's a lot of plants like that. So in terms of don't rake the leaves, if you do need to cut things back a little bit, cut them back about 18 inches high. Because a lot of times those little holes in the top, insects will go in there and overwinter. That's mainly it. And then in the spring, if there's areas in my garden where the wind will blow the leaves, so the leaves will end up being like about that deep. So that's hard for plants to grow through if it's that deep. So I will take those leaves away in the spring and compost them, or put them in other places of the garden where it's been swept clear of leaves, so that plants can grow up through them.
Okay.
But
so
those
you kind of will move the mulch.
Yeah,
Okay.
If it's really inhibiting the plant growth, I'll move the leaves around, because I don't have any maple trees on my little 2/10 of an acre, but there's maple trees from across the yard and the road, and they just blow up into this one area, and then you'll find that different plants under there just kind of so.
And now for the bees, no raking.
Yeah.
Is that because the act of raking disturbs the eggs, or is it because people rake and dispose of?
It's because both. So it depends. Like if you have lawn and you don't want it to be killed and you want to have some lawn because your kids play there or grandkids or whatever, it's like fine, But where I wouldn't rake the leaves is where there's actually under bushes, under the trees, wherever there's garden, I would leave those leaves stay. And the reason for that is some types of bees will crawl down under the leaves and nest there. If you have an oak tree and you have leaves under it, the moths and butterflies will lay their eggs up there, and then the caterpillars will come down and fall down onto the leaves, and they'll burrow under the leaves and overwinter either as caterpillars or, they'll create a chrysalis and then they'll come out the next year.
So even the act of moving those leaves is going to
it's going to disturb them, Okay. And I don't know exactly how much it would disturb them, if it would kill them, but it's just better to leave them. The other thing that happens is the mycelial networks that are being created because of the decomposition of the leaves. There's lots of organisms and things that will grow in the soil as a result of that. And so the less you disturb that, the better it is. And there's often these symbiotic relationships between the mycorrhizal fungi and the plants, the health of the plants. And we still, it's too early to say definitively, there's relationships between these insects and those mycorrhizal fungi. All we know is that's the way it's always been. It's only recently that we've kind of killed those networks and things, and we've seen the result of that. Right. So you want to make sure that all of the ecosystem is kind of operating in the most holistic way possible. And just because we don't know exactly how it all comes together doesn't mean it isn't there, if that makes sense. Okay. Any other questions about that? Or
are chickens predators, pollinators?
I have chickens, and I'm sure they eat a ton of insects, but that, in my mind, is I don't have big chickens, I have little chickens. And the reason I have the littler chickens is because they can't do as much damage. They will, scratch through things, and then I create a barrier for the things that I don't want them to get into, because they can cause havoc, So you have to kind of make sure they're in the place where you want them to be. But they do eat a lot of insects, but they also eat ticks. And
yes, no, I don't have ticks.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, is there a
I have to
crossing of the line?
Yes, yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would, if you want to experiment with it, I would definitely experiment with it. I don't think they have any effect on bees or something, but even on my small property, there's one area where the chickens tend to stay, and there's a whole lot of other area where they don't have anything to do with, so it's undisturbed. So, yeah. Do you guys have any questions about?
Just taking it all in.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. That's why I wanted to have this sheet here, because it's like, even if you can only, plant one thing, it's okay. I know I've said you need something from spring until whatever. Don't let anything stop you. If this year you're planting something that blooms from July through, August, no problem, plant it. Don't, do what you can. Because next year you'll get a different plant, and you'll plant that. And the next thing you know, somebody's going to say to you, hey, do you want some, this plant or that plant? I have extra. And you'll be like, oh, okay. And you'll put it in, and you'll just be learning as you go along. You'll be learning what things like to grow where, how big things get, and this is all part of the learning process. One of the things that I love about this process is that we are starting to understand that we can't live without these other animals, that these other animals are part of our community. And that's why we're called Lee Community Gardens, growing food for people and pollinators, because the community is the organisms in the soil, it's us, and it's everything in between. It's all the insects, all the birds. One of the examples about birds is a little chickadee will lay maybe 4 eggs in a nest. It needs thousands and thousands of caterpillars in order to feed those chickadees. So one of the best indicators that you are feeding the bees and the butterflies is if you have birds nesting, because the birds cannot nest and cannot produce chicks unless they have the insects that they need to feed the chicks. So It's great to put out bird feeders. They need that energy from seeds and all that kind of stuff. And that is not what they feed the baby birds. The baby birds need the insect larvae or the insects themselves. So there's lots. I could talk forever on this. You could probably tell. But we'll just wrap up by saying I have. Let's see. Oh yeah, there's Lee Community Gardens. There's a sheet right there with my phone number, I think, and my address and the email. I like to leave myself very open to people that want support or want questions or just want to be involved in some way. So I encourage you to take that and not be shy. Please be in touch. And also, I do give tours of my garden here up on High Street. So I'd be happy to give you a tour and show you what we've done. We've gone a little crazy and put in a little pond and done all these little things, and it's been really a wonderful process to see that happening. So I just want to thank you all for coming.
Knock on your door.
Yes, exactly. Okay.